The Texas A&M Aggies are ready to take on the Auburn Tigers. Which team is under more pressure in this football game?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a crossover edition of Locked On Auburn and Locked On Aggies. I'm Zac Blackerby, host of Locked On Auburn. He's Andrew Stefaniak, the host of Locked On Aggies. And Andrew, both of these teams start out conference play this weekend, a showdown in what we know is the final year of the SEC West between Auburn and Texas A&M. And I think both teams kind of are feeling pressure for different reasons. I think Hugh Freeze from the Auburn side wants to make a statement because he's kind of been counted out by everyone, including our friends at Fadil. We'll get to them in a second. And then on your side of the aisle, the Texas A&M side of the aisle, if Jimbo Fisher loses, everyone's going to freak out. You're already hearing mumblings of all these rich people saying, we'll come up with the money for the ridiculous buyout if we have to. So my first question to you as we start this conversation, who has more pressure, the Auburn side of things or the Texas A&M side of things?
It's a great question, but I have to lean the Texas A&M side of things just because when you look at Auburn's schedule, I was looking at it, and they're not favored in their next handful of games to where to succeed, what I assume Auburn fans' expectations are for the year, I don't think they necessarily need to win this game. Texas A&M, we've counted this as one of the games that if you want to have the year that fans want, 9 wins, 10 wins is off the table a bit now since the Miami loss happened. But 9 wins, if you want to achieve that goal, you cannot lose this football game. And like you said, that's when rumblings are going to start to happen. If you start the season 2-2, it's not going to be pretty. So this is a football game. If you're a Texas A&M player or coach, I think you got to win this one.
Do you think there's any of that going on in Jimbo's head, right? I mean, he sees these reports that sources are coming out and reporting that, we'll find the money if we need to. Or is it just so much money where you're like, you know what? Like, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay. But these coaches aren't wired that way, right? Like Jimbo wants to win at Texas A&M.
Yeah, that's a good question because it's like, if you ask him, he's going to say, oh, no, I don't look at any of that. None of that bothers me. But I mean, I think it's part of humanity. I mean, we all see that stuff. We all see that kind of stuff. So how much does it affect them? I don't know. But you definitely know he's seeing it. I just don't know how much of an effect it has on, his day-to-day job coaching the Aggies.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about Saturday is there's pressure on both of these teams. But whoever wins on Saturday with the current state of the SEC West is the worst I've seen it, or maybe the most even I've seen it in my time covering college football. I'm sure you're going to say the same thing because Alabama looks vulnerable. Ole Miss is Ole Miss. Until you win the division or the conference, Lane Kiffin, I'm just not going to believe it. And then, Mississippi State looks really bad. LSU, depends on what version of them you get. I think they're front runners, and I just think somebody's going to pop them in the mouth early and they're not going to respond well. And I think whoever wins on Saturday, that fan base is going to be able to convince themselves that, we can win the SEC West. We're contenders for the SEC West in its final year.
You look at the SEC West, and it's something I've talked a lot about over on my show, but exactly what you said. Yeah. It's not the West that we are used to seeing. And I talked about how much pain it brings me as an SEC homer to see the SEC struggling as a whole. But no, the conference is not strong right now, I don't think. And I think that creates opportunities for teams not named Alabama and Georgia to kind of make a run at this. And that includes Auburn and Texas A&M. And I mean, I know Texas A&M is one thing I talk about a lot is the blue chip ratio, the talent on this roster. It has to click at some point. And, if it's this year, I know that they already dropped the ball game against Miami, but I mean, it still could click. If it does click, the sky's the limit for this football team, but it has to click. I think the SEC West, I think, like you said, whoever wins this football game, I think either fan base is gonna get really excited based on what we've seen from the conference so far this season.
Yeah, these early season games are so interesting, especially when you start conference play, because We still don't know a whole lot about either team. I think we know more about Texas A&M because they played Miami and Auburn played Cal. I think Miami's way better than what Cal is. But how important do you think those two games were specifically? A&M's loss to Miami, Auburn's narrow win against Cal. I'm curious to see, like, okay, is that who those two teams actually were because that's the best level of competition that they've played? Or are they going to look like totally different teams when they play each other on Saturday? Because I'm sure Auburn held things back against Cal. A&M may not have been in a situation to do that against Miami just because of the nature of the opponent. But I think there's a chance on Saturday we see two totally different teams than what we were expecting.
You know, that's another interesting point. I did have the pleasure, or some might say the displeasure, of watching Auburn's game at Cal. Good for the Tigers for leaving that one with a win, but man, that was not a fun way to spend 2 a.m.
That's right.
But, right. You know, I mean, it was a big, but I mean, all joking aside, that was a big win for Auburn. I mean, you know, it was good for them and Coach Freeze to go on the road, travel all that way and get a win on the road against a Power 5 team. But no, I mean, I watched that game knowing what Hugh Freeze is and I know he's not calling the plays. And I know I've heard him say he called a couple, but Philip Montgomery's your play caller. But, you know, I watched that offense and I did think it was a little bit, you know, vanilla. I thought there was a lot more they could show. And that was my initial reaction, like you said, was they're holding something back for SEC play because they think they can win this game without, you know, showing everything. For Texas A&M, you know, it was one of those football games. I just think, you know, Miami made their mistakes. You know, they gifted A&M 14 points right out the chute with a block punt and a muffed punt, given goal-to-go opportunities, and the Aggies were able to punch it in. But then in the second half, it was kind of a flip of that script, and Texas A&M gave Miami the football and turned the ball over and made some mistakes. So, I think Texas A&M, I mean, they're in that football game, I think, if they don't make those mistakes.
Yeah.
You let a kickoff go to the house. And I think that's going to be the key is taking care of the football. So I think Texas A&M is a great football team that turned the ball over too much and it bit them in the behind against Miami. And Auburn, I think, like you said, I think we don't know what that team is yet. I think they have a lot that's going to potentially surprise us coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the way these two games unfolded for these two teams, I think it benefits Auburn a little bit because I think it's very clear how an offense should attack Texas A&M. And that's by passing the football, throwing the football in that intermediate range, 10 to 15 yards down the field. We saw Auburn kind of go out of their way to do that against Samford last week. I think a lot of arrows in this matchup point towards Texas A&M. I think this is one of the few that does point towards Auburn.
You know, I agree. Now, my only question there would be when it comes to Auburn attacking Texas A&M is what are we going to see from Payton Thorne? And I know they were doing the 2 quarterback thing. Are they not? Is that not a thing anymore? What's the deal with that?
I think we're going to see them both on Saturday. Yeah, I think we'll see both Payton Thorne and Robbie Ashford on Saturday. Yep.
But Payton Thorne obviously is your downfield guy, throw the football guy. Robbie Ashford's going to come in and run the ball on you. And, you know, can Payton Thorne and can these receivers, can they get open? Now, I'll tell you, I mean, I was watching, there were receivers getting open for Louisiana Monroe against Texas A&M on Saturday. So, you know, in no way am I saying that I don't think these Auburn receivers can get open, but I think they can, and I think they will. But, you know, can it work in can both things happen? Can Payton Thorne get it to the receivers? Can the receivers get open? That's going to be interesting because if they can, Auburn's going to be able to attack the Aggies there. And I mean, it's definitely going to happen a few times. The question is, will it happen all game long? And I think that could make or break this football game for the Auburn Tigers if they can throw it all game long.
Andrew, there's been a few narratives that have popped up this week about this game. There's one that I don't think has popped up that several Auburn fans have mentioned to me, and I want to get your thoughts on it in just a moment. Right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Auburn and Locked On Aggies. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Jace Medical. They have an awesome product. It's called the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace Case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians, and then you can get ongoing care from physicians on any treatment-related questions. is doctor created and doctor recommended. Look, with supply chain issues all over the place, you want to make sure that one of the things you don't have to wait on is your medication, and Jase Medical gets that. And they receive, if you order it, some people receive the package the same day they get a sinus infection and their doctor was out of town, and that really impacts your life. So right now you can save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using our code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout at jasemedical.com. That is spelled JASE medical.com. Andrew, one narrative that I was expecting to pop up more, especially from the Auburn side that really hasn't, is last year's game. I mean, A&M's roster, I'm sure with the world of the transfer portal and recruiting and all of that there were some changes to the roster, but the core of Texas A&M's roster last year went to Jordan-Hare Stadium and lost to a very bad Auburn team, and Auburn flipped their roster much more than Texas A&M did. Why do you think that's not a talking point this week?
You know, the one thing I look at that football game, you know, from the Texas A&M side, you know, as painful as the loss was, seeing Coach Cadillac Williams, I do think that was pretty cool. Seeing him come out, you know, and so I think everybody can agree on that. But I think the difference from this year to last year and why that narrative hasn't floated around a ton is a little bit of it's coaching turnover. One thing I've been super high on is Coach Petrino. I actually heard a quote from Coach Freeze talking about Coach Petrino and the kind of struggles that he brings to opposing, you know, defenses and defensive coordinators.
Yeah, you may want to clarify that. Not just struggles that he brings, but to who. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, looking at last year's matchup, I just think Jimbo was calling plays last year, and it wasn't working. That offense wasn't flowing. And like I said, your offensive line is pretty much the exact same. You lose Devon Achane, of course. He's playing for the Dolphins now. You lose.
He beat my Patriots Sunday night.
Yes, I was very appreciative of that. And Raheem Mostert, who I appreciate him as well. But, you know, you look at this, and I think last season compared to this year, that the turnover is not really there player-wise. I think it's more coaching staff.
Yeah.
Your offensive line's back. Your quarterback, Connor Wigman, has taken a big step. He's looked really good thus far.
Is he the real deal, you think? Is he a top half SEC quarterback?
I'm sold on Connor Wigman. I think he is the real deal. But I just think that it's not really turnover. I think it's a matter that you play in the game in front of your home fans. And I think the coaching turnover, and you got a lot of those former 5-stars. This is the last point I'll make on it. A lot of those players were young. I mean, that 2022 class was freshmen last year. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of talent, a lot of 5-stars out there that were young. They've all developed a little bit. The defensive line and getting some pressures, I'm sure we'll get into that. But I think the difference from last year to this year is just developing talent, Coach Bobby Petrino, and the big step forward Connor Wigman's taken.
Okay. So yesterday, you and I were texting back and forth, and I asked for a few names to say, who do I need to be talking about? And this was on a show that we put up yesterday. And you said the two receivers, Evan Stewart and Aniyah Smith. That makes sense. Why did you tell me Walter Nolan and Fadil Diggs? Because the more I looked into them, specifically Diggs, I didn't really see anything special with those guys. And now I think the defensive unit of A&M's front seven is good, impressive, and I think is going to present trouble for Auburn. But why those two guys specifically? Why Nolan and Diggs?
So it almost was kind of a you need those two to play well if you want to beat Auburn and if you want to have a successful season. Fadil Diggs is your best pass rusher. One of the big annoyances.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Andrew, but what are you basing that on? He's had 48 pass rush attempts, and he's forced 4 pressures. Like that's not good.
Well, so that's what I'm going to get into. Really,
Go ahead.
You're good. Is the lack of Coach Durkin doesn't like to draw up pressures. Our defensive coordinator DJ Durkin does not call up pressures. He doesn't like to send. He doesn't enjoy sacks. He doesn't enjoy stopping the other team. He's like, you know what? You all just pass on us all game long. And my thought here is this: I am hoping that he's looked back at that Miami tape and said, "Wow, Tyler Van Dyke had all day in the pocket, and he picked us apart. I have got to dial up pressure. Is that going to happen? I don't know. He might be a little stubborn and not do that, but I think anybody that watches that tape back, says we need to get more pressure on the quarterback. And over these last few years, when you need someone to go get you a sack, it's been Fadil Diggs. So while we haven't seen much of it this season, he hasn't had much success at it this season. It's kind of more of a hope than a something that's happened thus far this year. It's something that I think if the Aggies want to win 9 games this year, Fadil Diggs needs to get after the quarterback a whole lot, and he has yet to do it this season. And then Walter Nolan's just a beast. He's just a talented player, one of those highly ranked 5-star players, one of the highest ranked players in Texas A&M football history. And he just needs to really get going big time. He needs to, stop the run, get after the quarterback. Texas A&M's done a good job stopping the run compared to what many imagined this year. And so I guess my argument is, have these guys been perfect this year? No. But I think if you want to beat the Auburn Tigers and put up, be 6-2 in SEC play, those 2 guys need to be a big part of it.
Sure. I get that. And look, a storyline from the Auburn side of it this week is the offensive line is a little banged up. Cam Stutz, team captain, represented Auburn in Nashville at media days, and he's been, from my point of view, a very pleasant surprise. I didn't really see this coming, to be honest, but he went down against Samford, and you saw that interior push go away. And Freeze kind of mentioned, like, he's kind of the dude in that room. And he left the game. He was at practice earlier this week, so we'll certainly see if he plays. That's, I think, a good sign, the fact that he was in practice so early in the week. And then Xavion Miller, that one looked a little bit more serious. That looked like an ankle sprain to me. I'm not a doctor, but this is what it looked like. So we'll see if he's able to play. But, I mean, you talk about Nolan specifically because he's more in the interior, right? He's more of like your 3 technique.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you do not have Stutz and you have the opportunity to line him up against the backup guard, that's a big mismatch in favor of Texas A&M.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually didn't know that Auburn was dealing with some offensive line injuries. But it's a great point. I mean, he can take advantage of that. If you're bringing in a guy that's not one of your guys, and I don't know about the depth, is Auburn, are they deep in the offensive line, or is it kind of a starting 5 heavy room?
I think they've got like 6 dudes I feel really good about.
Okay.
And they're on their 7th guy. So that's where it kind of gets a little iffy.
Yeah. But, that's a good point. I mean, if Walter Nolan's able to pick on a guard who, the Auburn coaching staff really doesn't want in there, I mean, that could be a way to kind of take advantage of it. But, so I think we're going to need to see Walter Nolan, try and get some pressure, stop the run. And then Fadil Diggs, try and take advantage of those tackles. I know the tackles for Auburn have been great this year. I saw a stat that you sent about the Dylan Wade. Is he the right tackle? Or is he's left tackle? Dylan Wade left tackle. And he hasn't allowed any pressure. So,
right.
What A&M hasn't been able to do this year is get pressure. And I don't know if that's really based on personnel or if it's based on coaching staff. I lean toward the latter. But if Fadil Diggs isn't able to get pressure or any, of the pass rushers aren't able to get pressure, I think Payton Thorne will be able to pick this secondary apart and make this game more of a shootout than a kind of low scoring SEC West defensive affair.
You want to drop some predictions? You want to do it? Let's do it. All right. That's coming up in just a moment right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Auburn and Locked On Aggies. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's the best place to wager on all of your sports action. And look, we're about to do a full segment on it, but Auburn is a 7.5-point dog. If you like the Tigers, put the money on Auburn to cover that 7.5. If you like the Aggies and you like the Aggies by a bunch, throw the money on Texas A&M. But right now, they've got a cool deal at FanDuel. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. You can use the bonus bets on spreads or player props, over-unders. They've got more than just that as well. So be sure to check out their app that's very easy to use. Also visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off your betting for the NFL, college football, and more. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Andrew, 7.5 points. It's a lot of points. That's a lot of points in favor of your Aggies. You think that's fair? You think that's accurate?
I think a lot of that is home field advantage points. Now, I know we're going to get into predictions. Do I think the Aggies win this game? Yes, I do. Do I think they cover? That is when this conversation gets more interesting.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's a lot of points playing at home in an SEC West, matchup. Even though you're at home, it just does feel like a lot of points. So, I think the Aggies win, but did they cover? That's what I'm going to kind of have to sit here and think about.
Yeah, the home field advantage angle is interesting because for a while, the teams in the series played better on the road than they did at home. Auburn did well at College Station. The Aggies did well at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So that's kind of been interesting. It's evened out since then, but the first few times when A&M came into the SEC, it's like they were trading road wins. It was very, very interesting there. But so I don't know how that's necessarily going to impact Saturday. I do think it's relevant, though. It's something you've got to think about because we saw how Payton Thorne, you said you watched the game, you saw how Payton Thorne looked early against Cal. It wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. And I don't know if it was all him or if it was other people, but something didn't look right with him when he took the field on the road. And I'm just guessing. I think you'll agree. But I imagine A&M people will not be as I think they will be more intense than the Cal fans were in that half-filled stadium. So I just think I think that's certainly part of it. I'm with you. I think 7.5 is a lot. I'm picking Texas A&M to win this game. I think the Aggies win on Saturday. But I'm with you. 7.5 is a bunch. It's a bunch. I can't wait to see Connor Wigman and then his receivers with Evan Stewart and Anaya Smith. I can't wait for them to go up against Auburn's defensive backs. That is the strength of this team. DJ James, I could watch him play football all day long. Nehemiah Pritchett is expected to make his return coming off of injury. He's kind of been banged up for a few weeks. It seems like he's going to be ready to go. Kayan Lee, one of the better freshman corners in America. I've been really, really impressed with him. I can't wait to see how Auburn's defensive game plan works and what they're aiming to do with personnel. And then also the other side of it is I'm just really intrigued with, can Connor Wigman throw against a good defense? No disrespect to Miami, but Auburn's defense is better than Miami's. So what does that look like? Right. I think there's a chance that that both defenses look a little good. I think both defense probably the over-under right now, FanDuel's 51.5. I think right now I'm leaning towards the under. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I lean in the under. And that was one of the things I was kind of battling back and forth was, is this going to be a shootout? Is this going to be a low scoring game? And you make a good point bringing that up, and that I could see this being an under. I looked at and I have two points to respond to some stuff you kind of just went over. The first thing is, Payton Thorne, the Cal game, what I saw in the stadium was a whole lot of orange and blue. I did not see a lot of yellow and blue. Was that a true road test? Now, yes, I understand that the road, the travel and all that, that's, tough on the team and good for Auburn going and getting the job done, representing the SEC while winning that football game.
Right.
But when it comes to the environment, I'm not a big believer in that. In what we saw there, I think that Payton Thorne is going to have to prove it in a real SEC environment. And I know he came from the Big Ten. He's played in some big time environments, but he hasn't played in a deep South SEC environment. And it'll be interesting to see how he responds to that. First road game in the SEC. That's, first road SEC game for Thorne. So it'll be interesting to see how he responds to that. And then it's a great point you make. I think that Texas A&M's receivers versus Auburn's secondary is the biggest matchup on the football field on Saturday. I talked about that on my show. Auburn has a really talented secondary, like you said. I think that and the running back room, from what I've seen, are the two best rooms on the team. And Texas A&M's strength is throwing the football, is using Connor Wigman to just fill it up, throw it around, throw it to all these different talented guys. That's going to be the key here. If they want to win this football game, they need to get the ball to the receivers and early and often, but I think they want to have balance too. They want to be able to run the football. They haven't run it crazy well so far this year, so they're going to want to run the football a little bit better against Auburn and have that balance that Coach Petrino loves to have. But you're right. I think I'm hammering the under here. I thought about it. I've kind of gone back and forth, but you've convinced me on the under. I'm in on it. I'm in on the under. And then are we ready to get into some predictions here?
Yeah. I mean, just kind of to echo what you were saying, this game feels like a 27-20 to me. So I guess I'll go 27-20 Texas A&M.
Which would have a lot of people in Vegas angry if they leaned toward A&M -7.5.
But they always get it close. That's kind of why I'm basing it off of that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. But man, I'm gonna go a little bit lower scoring contest than you, and I'm gonna go 24-17 Texas A&M Aggies.
All right, so we're not too far off.
Yeah,
we're not too far off there. So we'll see. Let us know in the comments whether you're watching the Locked On Auburn channel or the Locked On Aggies channel, and please click that subscribe button. Andrew, best of luck this weekend, and hopefully we chat again soon.
Yep, good luck to the Auburn Tigers this weekend as well. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On Aggies. We will see you tomorrow.